Fast fact. The Great Chicago Fire of 1871 had a profound impact on the home insurance industry. Despite less than 50% of the fire's damage being insured, many companies still chose to honor the policies, playing a vital role in Chicago's recovery. I'm Drew Thomas, and this is Bank Chats.
Did we do like a soft shoe or anything to start that?
Oh no, that's all put in. That's all put in post. Yeah, so we don't actually listen to the. For those of you that are listening right now, as we're talking about this, we don't actually listen to the theme song or anything. We're tired of it, right?
I listen to it. I edit it.
That's true.
I
You do
it every single time.
Yeah, and you love it.
I do.
Yeah.
You snap along with it or anything?
So we're gonna have a very sort of interesting discussion today. Something different than what I think we've done in the past. We bring experts on the show all the time.
Now we have a complete amateur who knows nothing.
And I wouldn't call you a complete amateur, but we're looking at something from the side of the perspective that we typically don't. We're always looking at it from the bank perspective or from the, not from the perspective of the
not
person
the real world
with
experience side. Yes.
Yes.
Right.
So we are going to talk. I'm going to let you introduce yourself. So this is Matthew.
Matthew Noel.
Matthew.
And hi.
We're going to put a big light bulb above your head.
Nice.
and
Do I get a lower third on me or anything?
We can probably do that if it really makes you feel
a lower third.
Okay.
I am demanding a lower third.
We can do that.
Fair enough.
This is going to be a fun one.
Yeah. So Matt is here to talk to us a little bit about some personal experience he had on dealing with homeowners insurance. And this is something that we've never really talked about on the show because it's every situation is different, obviously. And we're going to give you one example of what it's like to deal with a homeowner's insurance claim. But we want you to tell your story. We're just going to kind of talk through it. We're going to probably pepper you with questions throughout. But we'll let you get started on telling us.
Because I'll be really boring if you just let me tell a story for 45 minutes.
I know. No.
We know, man.
We've been there. Yeah. So go ahead. So tell us. So you, I'll let you decide where you want to start this story. But basically, you experienced an issue with a home that you were not yet occupying, correct?
We were in, but not like. So we bought a house and it needed a lot of work, and so we were working on it. Basically, I was putting in a new hardwood floor. So we had stuff there. We would stay there. And so we were sort of there and at the other house because we still had a lot of our stuff there. It was a weird situation. And they were only, you could get from one to the other in a minute, So it wasn't like we didn't spend a lot of time at both places, but that's a weird setup because, it just is, and on top of it. So the thing that we're talking about, we had a water pipe burst basically. And, to add to it is the fact that it happened on Christmas Day, basically.
Yeah. Merry Christmas to you. Yeah.
So we weren't even there at all. We were at my parents' house basically the entire day. And by the time it was all said and done, we're like, oh, we'll just go back to the old house. And, we didn't give much thought to it. It was just like, it's Christmas Day. Everyone, great day, but everyone's tired afterwards. So we rolled into the old place. And then my dad had given us a one of those heaters, like the upright propane things that you might have on the porch or whatever.
Yeah.
Oh, like they put like on like
a patio type.
Yeah, like
stuff
patio.
like that. Gotcha.
He had one. He has a cabana behind their house, and so he has a couple of those heaters, or one of. It doesn't matter, but it's so it really.
No. I want to know exactly how many heaters he has.
3.4 heaters. I don't know how we got the 0.4. No, there's one. Anyway, if you want the exact.
It's the average American family now, right?
The average American family has one heater. But anyway, so he had given us that because he liked his on his. Anyway, it doesn't matter for this story. But he the next morning was like, "Hey, don't bother taking that home. I'll just load it in the car and I'll take it over to the new place. We have a nice outdoor porch there, and that was going to be kind of a thing that we used there. And I get a call from him, and he's like, hey, my brother had gone with him. He's like, Matt, I think you want to come over here right now. And it's like, okay. He's like, yeah, there's some leaking. He didn't really give me an understanding of the extent of the leaking. He just said, there's some water
And
coming.
it's pretty bad when you can see the leak from outside your house.
Well,
inside your house.
he had actually gone in.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So they did have a way to get in and everything. And he had gone in because he just thought, well, they weren't here last night. And it was it 2022 where we just had, the mall had a pipe burst. The Richland School District had a pipe burst.
Oh yeah. There have been some really cold winters around here.
Specifically the cold Christmas that like a bunch of businesses had this type of damage.
Gotcha.
In this area. And so he just thought, well, I'll go walk around the house, see what Matt's been working on, because we were fixing it up still, and we wanted to see kind of where we were with it. And they went in and again, nothing could have really prepared me for the amount that we were talking about here.
Yeah, when someone calls you and says that you have a leak at your house, like you're imagining like the water under the sink is leaking out or something like that.
Yeah,
but,
I expected one floor maybe or one room or whatever else, but he kind of gave me the the Star Trek thing of, Captain, you better get down here right now. Like, just tell me what the thing.
I don't need damage.
I don't need to come. Just tell me. No, but
don't make me run to engineering.
So I drove over there and yeah, it was about as bad as you could expect. So what had happened is the house itself, just looking back in retrospect, I was told that part of the house had almost been rebuilt more than once by the previous owners.
And this house isn't really all that old,
It's
really, at this point.
1990.
Yeah. So, now to me, 1990 was yesterday, but still, it's not that old,
No, 1990, not that old, but sort of in that weird spot where it's like between old style construction and modern construction. Like it's not an airtight house like you would expect out of a modern house, so the area that it was in clearly was under insulated. You know what I mean? And thankfully in this process, as you'll find out, we've gotten a chance to fix up a lot of the things in there. But so what had happened is just over the dining room of the house, there was some water pipes that had come down, I think from the bathroom down and then across the front of the house. And the area that they were in, the front of the house, there was a breeze there. Like once we sort of had it opened up, you literally could feel a breeze. So somewhere air was coming in and it was just going right over these pipes. And it was the very front of the house, which you're not really supposed to have, at least as I understand. You don't really have pipes on your exterior walls to begin with. So it's kind of a bad design, Anyway, neither here nor there. But because of that, both the hot and the cold pipe that were up there, which they're only like, the normal half-inch pipes or whatever, had both frozen, And I was shocked that the hot froze even, but they both froze, they both burst. And we later found out that it had put 12,000 gallons of water through our dining room. Now, mind you, this is all in the ceiling of the dining room. So it flowed across the ceiling and it ended up getting into the living room and the kitchen as well. Now, the layout of the house is like the dining room's on the corner and then sort of it spans the whole side of the house, and then the living room came off that, and then the kitchen came off that. And the kitchen was sort of like a galley style kitchen, not a huge kitchen or anything, but old, like 1990s, but custom made cabinetry, oak cabinetry on everything. So aged, but nice, and so when I got there, basically the entire roof of the dining room had caved in, and it was still, dripping and everything else. And of course my dad turned off the main downstairs. I told him where to find it and everything.
Well, that was nice of him.
Yeah.
12,000 gallons, a little too late.
12,000.
At least he didn't just walk out of the house and was like, all right,
Only we had stopped at 11,000.
Some people would panic and say, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. Yeah.
Yeah, it's possible. Yeah.
It was really weird though, because, it's like, because it was also the hot water, it had that weird, like, it was like walking into a swimming pool in a hotel. That smell? It was almost like, it had that, like,
just minus the chlorine.
Yeah. But it had that
comfortable disaster.
It was very strange. And so the initial thing, obviously, you saw the floor was wet. and you saw that the ceiling was no longer there, not completely, but mostly no longer there. And, of course it was in pieces and some stuff was still hanging down, insulation everywhere, all those types of things. So we didn't really have an understanding of the extent of the damage at that point, but obviously it was sort of where it was. Now, I had just finished the floor in the living room. Just maple hardwood. And we had to do something. We actually had to replace the subfloors as well, because the old subfloors were just, they weren't, I don't know if they were up to code in 1990 or not, but they weren't good.
Okay.
And they were like, you're supposed to have 3/4 inch ply with tongue and groove, and it's glued and nailed. And it was none of that. It was like 1/2 inch ply. You could see the joists underneath it. So we're like, all right, and this was the challenge of this house. As we were fixing things, we realized, we'd pull up a carpet and be like, all right, we're not just replacing the carpet because it's only got fiberboard. So we'll pull up the fiberboard. You don't want to put hardwood into fiberboard. So we rip that up. Oh my gosh. Now you can see the subfloor and it's all wavy and obviously not up to par.
So this is definitely something that I think most homeowners can relate to, honestly, which is when you start a project, if you're, and DIY is a big thing right now. I mean, everybody watches HGTV and they think that they can, remodel an entire kitchen inside of an hour or two. But most homeowners know that when you start a project, whatever you think you're getting yourself into, it's going to be more than that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It just is. And
it is.
so,
and I'm used to that. And I, not to give myself total credit, because I did do a lot of the work, but I also did get some people to come in and help me with some stuff. The subfloors were where I was like, I'm going to get somebody to come in and help with this. And so, I had a good crew come in. They were not a huge crew or anything, but I had a good crew come in and they had done the subfloors and stuff. But yeah, I mean, that's the exact thing though. Every time, my mindset is, let me see if I can do this.
Sure.
So
yeah.
I can tear up a carpet as well as anybody. I can pull up old hardwood even, so we get underneath and then we kind of see, okay, actually I'm going to need some help on this one.
And there's nothing that like an inspector or anything would have known prior to this.
No. And that's the thing. I mean, you wouldn't be able to look at it from underneath.
And know exactly
like
what's
a fine subfloor and everything else. But then once you get into it, So, all that to say, we had done all that, and unfortunately, the saddest part of it is the dining room was my favorite room in the house, because the people who sold us the house, lovely people, but every room was in business for itself. The whole house, like each and every room was like a whole new environment, separate from every other room in the house. It's just the nature of it. So our living room had oak squares and rectangles on the walls. They didn't frame anything. They were just kind of a design.
Yeah.
That's fine, but so every room.
But that design was never repeated in any other area of the house.
Every room had its own theme.
Yes, every room. Yes, it was like a theme hotel or something. Like every room was on its own. So the dining room though had I guess you call it wainscoting or chair rail or whatever, but it had oak on the bottom of the wall. The floor was a nice darker oak and everything. And it was like, I don't want to touch this room. This is nice. It knew what it wanted to be. It had kind of the classic doors that would go two-way doors, I guess you'd call them, or whatever.
Like the bar doors, like the old saloon bars, you'd have
the French door type thing.
But not just the one door and everything. So it closed off the dining room.
And it creaked. Yeah, it was just...
Every time you walked in, somebody looked up ready for a fight. No. But the dining room was
an upright piano plays in the distance, All right, sorry, I'm done.
That's okay. But the dining room was nice, and it was the one that it was like it had the most cohesive nature of all the rooms in the house. So we were like, I'm not touching this. This is nice. Now it had some weird stuff like the floor, because of the way we had replaced subfloor, and the new floor. I don't remember if it was right on the studs, or if it must have been still on a subfloor, but it was a shorter subfloor than the floor we had put in, because we did I can't think of what you call it, but good tongue and groove, 3/4 inch, so when we Advantech, that's what it's called. If you want to
plug for it,
Advantech, regardless, very, very standard though, type of subfloor that people use, So because of that, like the floors were off a little bit, everything else, and we were going to deal with transitions and stuff. But it was great. It was a nice room. Now it's gone. So I did not plan to replace this room, but God had better ideas. God and the freeze up of that day, you know.
So okay, so let's talk a little bit about, because obviously, I mean, this is a nightmare, right? It's the day after Christmas, basically.
I'm not much of a person for swearing, but I invented some new words.
So this is the day after Christmas or whatever, and you're seeing this. You don't know what's obviously your first thought, or one of your first thoughts must have been something along the lines of, thank goodness I have insurance, or something that I can say. But who do you call? Like, what do you do?
How do you file a claim? Yeah.
Well, I mean, so the good thing is, so we had purchased our insurance through a broker. And so the very first thing I did was contact the broker. Now it's Christmas. So, you know, it wasn't like it was going to be, I didn't expect anything to be instant, obviously.
Yeah.
And, you know, he kind of gave me the pertinent information. Now, the thing is, the broker really isn't the person you talk to make anything happen with a claim. So it was ultimately talking to the insurance company directly. So, but it was still nice to have somebody who kind of, hey, here's who you talk to or whatever else. And we had all that information. So it was sort of a repeat of stuff we had, but still going through a broker was nice because it was like we had somebody in our corner a little bit to kind of deal with some of that.
Yeah.
And he made some phone calls here and there to try and advocate for us and stuff, which was cool. I don't know if that's a normal role that a broker has. In our case, we got,
I believe so. Yeah.
I'd like to think so.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where, like, this is my one, like, I've had insurance on cars and houses and everything. I've never used it. Not once.
Yeah.
Not on a car, not on a house. That's not true. I did have one car I had to use it on, but even that was somebody, it was, my wife came back to where her car was parked and it wasn't there. So, and what had happened is, while she was parked, she was in Bedford. She was doing this thing in the woods with a student who was surveying a certain area, and she was out in the woods, and she got back.
I'm really glad you clarified
that. Yeah.
And but her car had been pushed down over the hill by somebody who basically was driving, and they they dropped their phone and they reached down, so they didn't break one bit. The car was just gone. So and Raina got there, and my wife Raina, and she's like, she called me. She said, somebody stole my car. And I was like, well, go talk to the police. And she got to the police, and they're like, are you looking for a car? She's like, yes. And they're like, we know where it is.
Well, at least they tattled on themselves. Yeah.
So there's no question once she actually talked to the police.
Yeah.
But anyway, so with them, again, similar situation, actually same broker group.
Yeah. That's very common.
Yeah. So I'll give a plug in that, at least to me, going through a broker has been a positive experience as a general rule, because they helped us with the car. There was even a point where it's like, I don't feel like we're getting quite enough money on that. So they're like, whoa, well, we can try and do this or that. So they finagled it a
Usually
little
get a pretty, a little bit of a discount at least too. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, I mean, but again, just kind of working with them, even though we had to, ultimately it's the insurance company that's going to pay out, but having the broker kind of in your corner seemed to be a good thing. So, so I've liked that. And even since then we've gone with a broker as a common rule. So anyway, contacted the insurance company. And truthfully, this is now a few years ago, so I don't quite remember how all the conversations went. I knew, part of it was going to be that we were going to have to mitigate what was there, so we talked to a local company, and there's a lot of different flood companies.
So in other words, clean up the mess, get things sort of under control, basically.
Take inventory of what was destroyed, pictures, all that kind of stuff too. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, and then we were gonna have, and then an adjuster was gonna come out and do pictures and stuff like you mentioned, and it was a lot of back and forth, and it ended up taking definitely a few months by the time it was sort of all said and done.
Now, is that typical? Because if you said that you were sort of bridging your time. You were sort of partially living in that house and then partially living in your old house. But not everybody has a second house that they can stay in.
Yeah, we were
while they're
lucky.
Getting this taken care of. Yeah. So what would an insurance company do if you didn't have, would they put you up in a hotel or something?
To my knowledge, just talking with them about it, we were sort of like, well, we have our other house that we're kind of still have. We're and they're like, okay, well, if you could stay there, that's great. But yeah, they would have potentially like handled, putting you up in a hotel or putting you up in some kind of temporary situation.
Yeah.
But check with your policyholder first, because because that's
my-
not always the case.
In my
That
specific,
has to be
No, I
written,
can
it has to
imagine
be
it's
written
not.
into your policy. Yeah.
we were, I mean, and to be fair, that was one of the things that I've always sort of gone, I've never gone bare minimum on policies. Like it does cost a little bit more, but like we get full tort on our auto. We get like little bit extra. I'm not crazy. I don't need, but just that little bit extra to make sure, like, if this happens, we're covered. At least we get a rental. At least we get a place to stay. At least we get whatever. And again, we were incredibly lucky that we were still in this situation where, okay, well, we have a house, so we're going to go and live there and just kind of continue doing what we're doing.
Yeah, the funny thing was I looked up a statistic on this, and they said that 63% of policyholders who have homeowners insurance are essentially underinsured.
Yeah,
like they don't have adequate coverage to cover their house. And there's a number of reasons why that could happen. Either you've added on to the house and you didn't bother to tell your insurance company. You built something, you built a shed or like a mother-in-law suite or something, and all of a sudden now your house is actually worth more than what you initially insured it for. But it struck me that seriously, like 2/3 of people are underinsured. Which is crazy.
I mean, and that was the stress of the situation, is like, are we going to be covered by this? Is it, and insurance companies can be a little bit weird about things like, freeze up and things like that. Like there's certain, and again, you have to check your policy. So it's almost dumb luck that our policy happened to include all the things that it did. And again, having a good broker who is in your corner, who wanted to set us up with the right policy for what we were doing. And again, we were in a weird situation, and I don't know, there are some insurance companies that they could have said, actually, because you kind of have this weird dual house situation.
It's not your primary residence.
We're not going to actually cover you the way that we, and I will, to their credit, the insurance company took good care of us. They didn't fight us on anything. Like it was, and I can get into some of the details on, it did get a little bit weird for a while because of other circumstances. But again, I mean, even the little bit of pushback that they gave us, like they were a very good company, it ended up, again, through this broker, they have a whole variety of companies. So it wasn't like a super national company that we ended up getting our insurance through. And that was fine because again, they took good care of us. And it seemed like, thankfully, our broker was one who, wasn't just looking for the cheapest policy. They were looking for a good policy. That happened to be as cheap as you could.
And you're probably a long-term customer too. So that probably helps a little bit.
That's the thing. I mean, we had been with them since probably, I mean, I had an auto insurance before I ever owned a house through them. So, and my parents were through them and everything else. So so they did good on all that. What happened though, what was crazy about it. So we initially thought, okay, the dining room, that's all that really, the water hit the dining room. But, on further looking at it, it hit the dining room, but, it has to go somewhere, So the saddest thing for me was the week-old floor, the new hardwood floor in the living room was all like curled up and stuff. It was good hardwood too. It wasn't just TP in it, but it, like all the wood was like buckled.
Warped,
and it was so sad. And again, if it had been, a year old, it would have bothered me a lot less, but it was a week old. I'd barely even gotten to walk on it.
It's kind of like whenever you buy a new car and you park at the other end of the parking lot to try to avoid anybody scratching it or something. And then somebody invariably decides that they need to park right next to you and open their door into the side of yours.
The runaway shopping cart just finds that car.
Being blown by the wind directly into the side of your car. 100%. Absolutely.
That was the situation. And then, so the mitigation company, and I'm not going to, I won't, you said we won't name any names or anything. The mitigation
we're not trying. I mean, we're not trying to throw anybody under a bus per se, but
so my plug on that is, check your mitigation company, make sure that they have good ratings and everything else. And ours did, but they, we had the sort of crack squad of teenagers come in to do some clean out and everything, and so initially. So just talking with the insurance company, initially we thought, okay, they're going to have to do some cleanup in like the kitchen. So, and again, it was in the ceiling. So it kind of spread in the ceiling and then went down the walls, inside the walls and stuff. And it all went to the basement. So to roll back for a second. So the dining room we knew was going to need to be done. the living room, obviously some stuff was going to need to be done. The floor was, again, I mean, and it spread on the floor pretty well. And then I thought the kitchen's not bad. And they actually were that's where the insurance company was like, the kitchen's fine, you know, and they brought in a guy who had a little moisture meter and he's checking stuff. And he's like, okay, this wall's good, you know, and went around all over the place. And they did that in like all the rooms and everything. Obviously the water emptied out through the basement. And unfortunately, so, you know, if there's 12,000 gallons, 11,000 of them went through our ductwork in through the air handler in the basement. So that was destroyed. So, yeah.
Through the air, it's like
you
through your
need
HVAC
furnace.
system.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Now, thankfully, it didn't touch the furnace, and the drainage in the basement was outstanding. Like it really didn't go far and wide in the basement itself, but you know, so, so the kitchen though was the questionable area, and it really looked like what they were going to do was, probably tear down some of the walls, certainly some of the ceiling, and then patch what they could. But to do all that, because it was the wall that connected, and again, like it was a galley kitchen, but it had stuff up against the wall that was connected to the dining room. So they were going to take down the shelves and probably do some stuff on that wall. And what they do is they they dry everything out. Obviously, if it's salvageable, they will do so. They have like a spray. This was an add-on that I think we paid for, but there was like a spray to prevent mold build up and stuff. And I was like, yeah, let's do that. The walls I don't ever want to open these walls again. So
Sure. Right. Yeah.
So they cut the lower third of the living room wall out, obviously the floor, and then the kitchen. So I keep rolling back to the kitchen.
I have that same problem.
Yeah.
Your second favorite room, right?
So they were taking it apart, and I worked from home. So I happened to be in my office, which I had put at that house early on. Like as soon as we owned the house, I'm like, this will be my new office, you know? And I hear them, you know, they're there, sort of taking things apart. And the very first thing I hear is a huge crash. And so what they had done is that it was, do you remember the Seinfeld episode where he gets a new kitchen?
No, I'm not.
Do you remember the
Seinfeld
Seinfeld episode when he gets a new kitchen? The very first thing is they have this one set of shelves right in the front where he's like looking under it the entire time. We had that. We had like the kitchen of the 1990s, you know? And I had always said, oh, you know, if we could take this down, that might be nice.
Yeah,
anyway.
right.
That was the first thing they took down. They did not know what all bolts were holding it to the ceiling.
So it really wasn't supposed to come down.
Well, it was not supposed to come down in the order that they took it down, with the speed that it
more
came
elegant.
down.
It came down with the speed.
It came down with some speed. And so the very first thing I heard is just this massive crash. And I walked out, and they had somebody had removed enough bolts that there was no longer enough support, but not enough bolts to actually remove it carefully. So the whole thing, it just crashed down. The oak was destroyed. The countertop was messed up. So the idea was to try to save the kitchen, but sort of the first thing that happened is the kitchen was destroyed outside of the flooding. And, you know, and again, to their credit, the insurance company, like, I don't know if anything happened after the fact with the mitigation.
So you found the mitigation company. They didn't find them for you, correct? So that wasn't their people.
No.
So the fact that you found them and they still did this, it was. They still took care of. They still took care of. It was still
coordinated through them. So I sort of said, "Hey, I'm talking to such and such an organization to do the mitigation. They also do plumbing work and stuff. And first, we had to get the pipe sealed back up, so we didn't have, you know." But they were fine with that. Like everything was coordinated through them. So if the insurance had said, no, you can't use them, of course we wouldn't have done so. But they were fine with it, you know?
Because did they give you like a checklist of things you have to go through? Like, I mean, I know you would know that you had to have, you know, someone do the cleanup, but
they do. So that's the interesting thing they did. And but it was interesting how much of it was like, obviously they wanted a contractor to do the rebuild.
Oh, sure.
But who the contractor was, they didn't care, so long as they were licensed and all the normal contractor things.
Yeah.
Now, the contractor, that was an interesting thing all in of itself, but the contractor really had to work hand in hand with them to clear everything and all of that. But the same sort of thing on a lot of the stuff. So, you know, with the mitigation crew, like they didn't care who it was, so long as they were licensed or whatever in some way, you know.
And see, I would say that's probably different than what most people experience if they have, say, an automotive accident or something.
Oh, sure. Yeah. It's
Most insurance companies tell you, like, you have to take it to a dealer, or you have to take it to this person, this specific guy.
Well, okay. So even for auto, I know these big box auto insurance companies for auto, they tend to like that kind of stuff, like going to specific repair shops. But you had mentioned that you went to maybe a smaller insurance company. And I found that that's the case too. That they don't, maybe the smaller ones don't care as much as these big box.
And that may well be. That may
maybe quite possibly.
We weren't through some massive insurance company, you know. So it may well be that like that's kind of just how they do it. They work with local places. Now the mitigation people were not like, you know, they'd be a name you'd recognize and everything. And again, I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus. They did a fine job with drying the place out and everything. They just they weren't able to deconstruct the kitchen without destroying it.
A massive spontaneous deconstruction, as they've said.
They work quick. Yeah.
And there was a lot of question. There really was over like, well, are they going to cover this? And I kind of had to, like, that was the one sort of, I don't want to say even fight or anything, but it was definitely some pushback on like, oh, we don't need to replace the kitchen. I'm like, I assure you, you do. It's in pieces. And I don't mean like big chunks you can reinstall. I mean in fractured, splintered pieces of wood and broken glass and everything.
I can pick my teeth with some of this wood. You know,
So, but again, you know, we got through that. They were like, they kind of had to say, yeah, we're going to have to cover this because you need to have a kitchen. You can't, you know, one of the things about insurance is, you know, the whole point is to get you back to whole, right?
Right.
So they looked at it. Like if you walked in and said, okay, I have, you know, a builder grade kitchen with, you know, cheap cabinets and everything else, they're going to replace, or they're going to give you a budget.
I have a 1970s Formica and linoleum kitchen, so therefore that's essentially what I'm going to be brought back to. Essentially,
so no, we just happen to have, it was tile, custom made cabinets, and solid countertop. Now it was like it's a plastic kind of, it's plastic, but it's solid. It's a solid countertop. I can't think of the name.
It's not like a resin. I'm sure.
No,
not like
I can't even think of the name. It doesn't matter. But it's considered a solid surface countertop. It's not like a Formica or anything. And so they were cool about it. Like they were like, okay, here's what we're going to work with. So we went, and again, this comes back to the contractor. The contractor really had to work hand in hand with them. And that was where the biggest part of this came, is that the contractor had to be on the phone with them a lot and just make sure that, you know, all the plans were very clear what they were doing. The budget was very clear. Now, once that happened, once it was approved, it wasn't real.
They just kind of came in and did the work at that point. Yeah.
But to get everything approved, to get the budget approved and all that, the contractor had to do a lot. And I give a lot of credit to them to kind of do. Now, I was on the phone a lot. You know, all of this, the funny part of it, it was all done very well. We have a very nice house now. We got a new kitchen. We don't have a 1980s kitchen. We got a 2022 kitchen, you know, but you know, you pay for it in stress. Is really what it came down to.
Time and stress.
Yeah. We, you know, it was one of those things where like in 10 years, maybe we would have done the kitchen, but you know, obviously our timeline moved up and everything. But again, you know, we got a quartz countertop. It's a very nice countertop. You know, we got oak, we got, you know, solid plywood cabinets and everything else. And it wasn't like, they didn't go crazy. It's not custom made. They went through like one of the big box stores and did like one of the better brand at the big box stores. Thing. So they put all that together. The basement was another interesting thing, and a place that they were going to potentially push back on was the mitigation company had the dryers in. They had just a massive amount of dryers. Again, 12,000 gallons went through. It was a lot of water. You know? So, and I mean,
that's a pool.
Yeah,
that is.
Yes,
I mean, really,
and all the duct work was the fiber duct work.
Okay,
with the built-in insulation and everything. But you know, that absorbs water a lot. You know?
It does.
So they came through, and I thought at one point that we were probably going to have to replace a lot of the duct work. But so they did this drying for 14 days or something. And that's where the adjuster kept pushing back. Like, they don't need to be in there that long. The drying should be done after a little bit of time. And I don't know the truth of the matter on that. All I know is they did it for a long, long time. And they actually had brought in their own generator to
Wow.
run all these things. And finally, I literally called a local electrician and had him come in and put in a 220 line right next to the electrical box, just so they had something to plug into, so we didn't have to deal with this generator. So in a
Right.
weird way, I actually took a little bit on myself that didn't,
Because you paid for the electricity
I
then
did.
to run
Now,
this thing.
I believe the insurance actually ultimately was like, yeah, we'll pay you back on that. And the other part was, once I got the electrical bill for 1 month was like, and we have gas heat, so it wasn't like the heat was coming through there, but like that, and that's an interesting other thing. The gas, the electrical, everything else for that 1 month, the walls are basically open in
Right.
December.
Oh, you're right.
So, and then on top of that, the electrical to run all these fans and everything else. I think our gas for the month was like $1,200. I think our electrical was like $800 or $900.
And so did you get reimbursed at all
Yeah,
for that?
and that's,
Okay.
I mean, that's the lucky thing, but it's a reimbursed. So we had to kind of front everything.
Yeah.
And that's
okay.
that's where there's some impact on
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
And we weren't hurting.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to compare to anybody else, because there's lots of people that get really hurt by these types of things. We were very lucky. We had 2 houses. We had the budget to absorb these hits until we got reimbursed on everything,
But so let me ask you this though: when it comes to the water,
Yeah.
were you, go ahead. Go ahead. No.
Were you on the hook for the pool?
I was totally. Now I will, again, it's an interesting thing to give the water company credit. They were like, so they're like, hey, we noticed your water usage was a bit high last month. Is that going to continue?
A bit high.
You don't think you would have, notified me when it started creeping up a little bit? In one day?
So yeah, they genuinely.
It's not like whenever they called me when my daughter came home from college one summer and they're like, we think that you might have a toilet leak, right? I'm like, no, she's just taking super long showers. That's a different story than what you went through. That's still not 12,000 gallons of water.
The funny thing is, I did have a toilet leak like a year later, and they did call me. But they called me, again, it's one thing to have 12,000 gallons over one night.
Right, yeah.
Over a month. It's not like they're real time reading your meter.
Yeah.
They're like, oh my gosh, we got to call this guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But yeah, but I believe, and I could be wrong on this, but I believe that they sort of offered a bit of a discount on the amount of water usage. They very specifically were like, oh, okay, well, we won't charge you for the drainage fee for all of those gallons. Because they didn't.
What is the drainage fee at that point?
When you pay for water,
No, I know, but I'm just saying, like, my sewer bill is $19 a month.
Right.
My water bill is significantly higher than that.
I didn't even know what it would have been, but it would have. I mean, obviously, it would have been something.
And it's all
pretty
fresh
significant.
water, too, at that
And
point, yeah.
Again, it may have been a different story because this is, not your primary residence.
Yeah, very true, very true. And now, interestingly, there was a drainage system in the house and everything, and I don't think it went back into the public water system. I think it went into our yard, basically, for the most part. So
you had well-watered grass
basically,
in December. You had an ice skating rink in your yard
You
at
have a
that
leach
point.
bed. You had a leach
I'm
pool.
probably wrong on that. It probably does go back into public because they're regular drains and everything. But regardless, like, they were cool on that. Like, they did. We still use 12,000 gallons of water, so it's not like they could have said, "I'm sorry, this is what it was."
Sure, right.
But they worked with it. And again, I think that I took that back to the insurance, and they covered that as well. There was some stuff that was like, I just fought over, and again, I say fought, like I just got on the phone, got past some pushback. Like, none of it was a fight. There was no yelling. I got some pushback on some things. So, but you get through all that. You get an insurance person. You talk to the insurance person a million times. You talk to the contractor a million times. You talk to the mitigation crew a million times, and you're just exhausted at some point. So there were certainly some things where I was like, I could probably send this to insurance, but it's $100 and it's just not worth my time to do that. We did.
Well, that goes back to what you were saying. That you pay in stress and time.
Yeah.
So at some point, if it's
battles,
if it's $100, it's like it's not worth the phone call. I'm just gonna pay
And
$100.
that's exactly what it was. Like, your brain starts doing that. Like, okay, we're in, many thousands of dollars, and this one thing got ruined. It's $10. Like, is that worth? Now, the insurance adjuster did ask for a list of items that were ruined and everything. And we had some furniture, we had some just stuff that was there,
Now, did they just, they didn't take your word for that though, did they? Or did you have to provide receipts or photos or anything to or did you just say like, oh no, I had a, 65-inch LCD?
Probably
that
as long as the value was under what the insurance policy was for, I would assume they would take your word for it.
Well, the insurance adjuster, that's where they came into play. Like they took pictures of everything. And if they had any question, he'd be like, could you send me a picture of that? And so we did do that where I sent like, hey, here, here's this thing. And I would just take pictures and send it to the guy. He had come out of Pittsburgh. So it was like, it was not just a easy, like, Pittsburgh's super far, but it wasn't just like a 10 minutes and he was there type of thing. So we did a lot on email and went back and forth on that. And I gave him he did ask me, I'm trying to remember the order of operations on this, but he did ask me basically for a list of values of things. He didn't ask for receipts or anything. Obviously I had the thing if I could take a picture of it, but he asked me what that thing was worth. And there were a couple spots where it was like, I don't know what we paid for this, but here's what it would cost to replace.
Yeah.
And so for the most part, there are items that fall under different categories. There are some items where it was like, if I literally had like some electronics there that I hadn't hooked up yet, and I was going to, but they were literally new in box, just happened to be in the corner of the dining room underneath, So a couple things like that. So there were items where they said, we're going to pay the full value of replacing that thing. And there were certain items that they said, we will pay a prorated sort of, if it's an old chair, they're not necessarily going to pay for a new chair. They're going to pay for the value of a 10-year-old chair at that point, So there were definitely some items that they finagled back and forth. And again, it's so funny though, because at this point, we're talking about the items when the house was everything,
Sure.
The total cost by the time we were done were 6 figures, let's put it that way, and so we were finagling at this point about, $1,500 worth of stuff, between.
So that's funny. I don't want to say it's funny that you say that, but it's one of those things where I was looking to see, and they say that believe it or not, wind and hail or storm damage is probably the most common thing that are turned into insurance companies for homeowners insurance.
Absolutely.
But water damage and freezing is second most common.
Okay.
It's about 1 in 67 homes, about 1.5% of policyholders will eventually have to turn in something akin to water damage or something along those lines. But they say that the average water damage claim is like 50,000, like 49,000, 50,000. But you also ran into an issue where I think yours was extensive. I mean, yours was not a bathtub overflowed and it took $50,000 to renovate the bathroom. Like yours was a lot more extensive than that.
The fact that it was Christmas night and we literally weren't there until the next morning, and we weren't there because we were hanging with family and doing all the things that you do on Christmas night anyway. Yeah. So the fact that it was like a perfect storm of not just that it happened the way it happened, again, both the cold and the hot broke. So it was, coming through, it was the full capacity of the house was basically pulling through there at that point, and again, it was the time frame that it was. So it just wasn't something that it was about maximum impact that you could have on that type of thing without really, if we'd been gone for a week or something, that'd be different. Yeah. Thankfully we were there the next morning, but still it was a lot. It's interesting.
So how long did it take? Like really, like you said, so from the beginning of that to whenever the contractor finally takes up his tarps and puts them in his van and drives away, like about how long did it take for the whole thing to be done?
And that's the thing. I mean, that really was where a lot of the stress came in. Because remember, we're trying to get out of this old house, sell the old house, move into a new house. And now all of a sudden, the really saddest part is finishing the living room floor was really the last thing we had to do. It was done. We were ready to just start moving everything in at that point. Yeah. It wasn't a question of like, oh, well, we need to do X, Y, and Z still. No, we were done. So it was the last thing we did. And then this happened, And so, so it was, I want to say the kitchen was done in June or July.
Okay.
So we had.
So we're talking like 6 months.
Oh,
basically.
easily,
Like you're talking like half a
Yeah.
year by the time this was all said and done.
Yeah. And I don't know, again, we were very lucky that we still happen to have the opportunity to have our old house to live in. I don't know if that's, I don't know if they would have covered us for that period of time to live somewhere else. I'm sure they must have if it was in our policy, but
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah.
It was, but, and again, obviously some mitigators, like if the kitchen had been able to be saved, that would have been a different conversation to some extent. Because the living room, you think about what goes into a normal room, like they had to do some stuff, but it was just rebuilding a room. Right?
Sure, right.
The
4 walls of floor. Yeah.
The dining room really was the same thing. But then when it came to the kitchen, that's where, it was extensive and we had to do a lot. And then on top of that, so part of that was kind of getting to the root cause of this too. We said, well, if we have the roof open, we're going to get the walls in this room really well insulated this time around, because obviously they weren't before.
Yeah, right.
And on top of it, like the way that the structure of the house was, you could really start to see up into there's like a knee wall, it's a Tudor style house. So there was a open area that was sort of like a storage area, whatever, but up in behind that really was all the same structure of insulation.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of had to do all of that in one go. You really couldn't just say, oh, I'll just leave this soaked insulation up here and not deal with it here. We had to kind of do all of it. So it touched the living room, the kitchen, the dining room, and our the master bedroom, master bathroom, because it was all sort of a connected system of insulation and the flooring and the ceiling.
Yeah. And like when you were saying about earlier about them saying about how long it was taking to dry, that it was, this would take 14 days to dry. Like, just I mean, this is really simplified, but imagine, taking and putting your clothes in the dryer and your socks are in the dryer for an hour and a half and you take them out, they're still damp.
Yeah.
Like, there are times when you just don't realize how long it takes to dry something like that, especially if it's dense insulation that is really not designed to retain or shed water. I'm sorry.
Well, and that's the thing. Insulation, if it gets wet like that, it's not something you say, I'll just dry out the insulation. It really is a pull everything out, replace everything kind of thing. And we actually did, I don't know if I'd still do it this way looking back, but we did spray foam in those walls because again, it had nothing there at that point. You could just see the brick basically, or the sheathing. And so we went a little bit extra. And again, insurance was cool about it. They covered it. They were like, we'll handle that. The basement, some of the ductwork had actually ripped off the ceiling because all the water that went through it just was too much for it. So it literally ripped off.
Well, again, that ductwork is designed to move air, not water. And that water's a lot heavier than the air that it's designed to move.
Absolutely. We even had one spot where it was just like a hole had opened, so it wasn't even like the whole thing ripped off. It was just like actually this is a spot. Just one little spot. Just work on through there. And then, but again, I mean, to the mitigation team's credit, they dried everything out very well. So they minimized, while the kitchen was a thing, but they minimized everything else. The ductwork that remained was well dried. It's been tested. There's no mold. There's no leftover anything. It was well tested. The walls where there could have been mold and stuff, they did a good job. It was well tested. There was no further issue with any of that. And again, it just took a long time because that's where the back and forth between the insurance company and the contractor took up some time because so that's an interesting thing. By the way, there were some things where they sent me a check directly, for the stuff that had been ruined. They sent me a check directly for the kitchen, for the rebuild. They sent the check to me with my name, but also with the contractor's name on it.
Okay.
And the way it had to work basically is I had to sign it over to the contractor directly. I never saw that money directly. It went just to the contractor and then they did all the work. And that by itself was a whole process.
Because they didn't want you going to get another cheaper contractor and plop it in there,
which
whatever.
People absolutely do. I mean, if you can get a certain amount, we know that happens with cars all the time. This much damage on my car. We're never going to fix that. We're just going to pocket that. That can't happen here. So there's definitely a process in place to make sure that the money that gets paid out for this goes into it. Because at the end of the day, the insurance company to some extent has an interest in this residence. It has to be up to a minimum standard.
Right.
Because they're insuring it. So if something happens, they're on the hook for that. This is an up to code safe structure, So they haven't that interest in saying like, yeah, this was done right and it was done by a qualified contractor. and
Okay,
everything else.
so that brings me to the next. So what I was reading was that most insurance companies, they consider 3 claims inside of 5 years to be excessive,
Oh,
right?
okay.
So essentially, you file 3 claims within 5 years, that's a red flag, and most insurance companies at that stage are going to say, you know what, maybe in your next renewal, we're not going to renew you,
Or you shouldn't file that one. Yeah.
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 Or at the same time, or either that, or we're going to jack up your premium to the sky, right?
Yeah.
How many claims did you get to file with your insurance company before that happened?
So importantly, like I said, we had, as far as I can recall, we've only ever had 1 claim on our vehicle, and that was totally the other person's fault.
Yeah.
And we've had 1 claim on any house that I've ever owned, and it was this one. Now, again, this was an excessive claim. Like, it was a big claim. I don't mean excessive.
Fair.
Like,
I mean,
it was legit in every
fair.
way, but it was a heavy claim. You
Yeah.
know? So yeah, they kicked us out right afterwards. Like they're like, hey, here's your money. Now get out. They got rid of us. And what was a worry, and this is where, like, talking to our broker was genuinely concerned. He's like,
Yeah.
I don't know that we're going to be able to find somebody with any reasonable amount that's like quality wise or premium wise or whatever
Sure,
else
right.
is going to be able to cover you properly. And I said, look, I will do what we need to do. Like, I will work with them. I will get you can get kits that will automatically clamp off the water if it senses any kind of leak.
Oh, and today you have all kinds of things, of moisture detection
yeah.
and all that kind of stuff, even smart home
I was
stuff.
gonna say, just monitor everything from your phone now. Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
weird because it's like, this is never going to happen again in this residence. Like, we know how horrible this was. We're going to do everything we can. So we're going to get the smart thing and the moisture sensor and everything else,
Right.
to not ever have this happen again. This will not be a claim that you will pay with us again, but that's just the game with insurance. Like they the goal is to not pay out. That's how they make their money.
Sure, right.
So they, but again, that's where the broker was like, I don't know what we're going to do here. And so I just started calling around, and I found another local broker, and I told her exactly what happened, everything else. And she's like, well, let me see what I can do, and at the end of it, we got a great company. And actually our premium ended up being a little bit less than the previous premium, oddly enough. So, again, when you think about being blessed about something, like I said, we paid for this in time and stress, but in so many ways, we were so well taken care of. And that's not a cut on the previous broker. He did everything he could do to
Sure.
try and work with us and find a new, it's just, they have a pool of people. They don't have everybody that they can.
Yeah, they
pull
work
from.
with
They have-
specific people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And just the people they were working with, it just wasn't going to be possible. So we have a good company as our insurer. We got a good broker now that's just happens to be with a different company. We had a place to live during that time. Like, just everything that you could have go was good. Now, I will say, like, one of the good things, I think the new broker was very clear on, like, okay, you're living here, but you own this house. So we're going to set up the policy this very specific way until you're physically living there.
Yeah.
It's going to be like a structure only policy. And then when we moved to the new house, now we had we wanted to fix up a few things on the old house and sell it. So we sort of flip flop. So this now became your primary residence thing. And the old house is now going to be your, it's just basically a fire policy. And that's about it, and so said the funny, not haha funny, but we actually had a pipe at the old house freeze up the next year.
Geez.
And thankfully no real damage, like very minimum damage.
But you knew what to do.
We knew what to do. Yes. And we did all, in that case, I said, okay, knowing what we've been through, and again, knowing that the policy that we have on this house is now much more minimum because it's just an empty structure at that point, as far as how the insurance treats it, I didn't even bother, and that's where it said, okay, it wasn't a huge hit, and, a couple thousand, which is not nothing, but again, thankfully we had the budget to deal with it. And I said, I'm not even going to go through them on this. I'm not even going to try, because it's not worth creating this ripple effect through what's going on with this other insurance company or anything else, So,
Well, so that's the other thing, and I forgive me, because we've covered a lot of ground, but I don't know if we've covered that. Technically speaking, there is no, unlike auto insurance, there is no requirement whatsoever as a homeowner for you to carry homeowners insurance unless you have a mortgage.
And that's right. The key. That's what that was where it came down to. Is it? I'd like to think that we would have had it because it's smart to have it. But I also recognize that the only reason that I ever even thought about it is that I don't want to say that's not. I didn't not think about it. But there was never a question. Our mortgage company said you must have insurance, so we always had insurance.
Yeah.
And now here's an interesting thing. If we had not been able to be covered through anybody else, mortgage companies themselves will insure you. They will.
Well, they'll find insurance.
The most expensive insurance mankind has ever conceived of.
Yeah, they actually
call it insurance.
Yeah, they actually call it forced placed insurance. Yeah. If you have a mortgage and your mortgage provider finds out that you don't have insurance on your home, they will buy insurance for you. Yes. And they will not shop around. You know,
that is, and yes, and that is exactly. And I don't even quite remember why, but we actually were in a position until we got the new insurance. We had to have some kind of coverage. So I think for like a month, we kind of had to go through like having.
It almost feels like Cobra, like when if you lose your job and then Cobra comes around and says, "Well, we can continue your medical coverage for you. It'll be 7 times what it was whenever you were working, but we'll keep it going." You know, until you can bridge the gap to something else, but.
So, and again, we got lucky with that. I mean, we took a hit on that for like a month, but it wasn't that bad. And then we got set up with the new insurance company, and everything's been good since then. And again, all because absolutely the mortgage companies always required it and everything. But that does bring up a point. Like you had said that in your situation, obviously, you were somewhat lucky that you did have another place to stay. You were fortunate enough that you were moving from one home to another, so you had a little bit of play in terms of your finances and so forth. But if you hadn't had insurance, like if you were one of these folks that was just like, hey, listen, I own my home free and clear, there's no legal requirement for me to have insurance. This is not something that you could have likely done yourself. You still would have had to have hired a contractor and all these people and paid out of pocket for it. It's not like you could have just fixed it yourself, most likely, I would assume, right? I will tell you, just knowing, it's hard in retrospect to say, I would have done this way because I know how things turned out. I mean, I certainly would have been much more personal on like, if we're going to take this kitchen apart, we're going to take it apart real carefully.
Yeah, right.
Because I'm putting this one back up if I have to pay for everything out of pocket. If I'm going to... I still would have paid for certain things. Like I certainly would have paid for anything about mold mitigation and stuff.
Yeah.
And it would have sucked because it's not cheap, but you have to do all that. I probably would have been, I'm not sure what I would have done about the drying and stuff. Like I said, it seemed excessive to the adjuster, but it wasn't something I was going to argue. Like I left that up to them to kind of argue back and forth on.
The reason that I kind of, I guess say that is because, like I said, like the average, like I said, the average for something like water damage, like say 50,000, right? Looking at some of the other stuff that's out there, believe it or not, liability coverage is one of the least turned in things to homeowners. You always see about people saying like, oh, well, in case the plumber falls down the stairs, I have to have homeowners insurance or something. And that may be true because obviously medical expenses are significantly higher than most other things, but technically speaking, it's the lowest thing that's turned in.
I expect those are those weird things where it's like the reason you don't hear about that, or the reason you do hear about that is actually because it's rare. Because when it happens, like most of it, like if I fell down at your house, I wouldn't think I'm going to sue my friend Drew. I would think,
thank you.
Yeah, you know what I mean. Like I would think, or if I'm a plumber or something, they carry their own insurance and things like that.
True. It's true. Yeah,
do their own thing. Yeah. So when you get in that weird spot where it's like, somebody's actually suing the homeowner for this situation, which really means they're trying to sue the homeowner's insurance. I'm not surprised by that in a weird way, because I would think that, again, you hear about it when it happens because like, oh my gosh, can you believe this?
Yeah.
Right. But
I think that happens probably more for like renters insurance, more than homeowners insurance. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you could be right about that. Yeah. But the reason that I was kind of bringing it up is that, believe it or not, I looked this up, the average premium in Pennsylvania, and we're talking Pennsylvania, but around the country, it's not that different. The average premium in 2022 was $1,120 a year in Pennsylvania for homeowners insurance, and the average compared to the national average that year, the national average was $1,569 a year for homeowners insurance. So for people that say, oh well, I'm not legally required to have it, so I'm not going to have it. Like, is it really? I mean, if you are a homeowner, is $1,500 a year really worth the chance of you having to pay out or come up with $1,500? That wouldn't have paid for your contractor to come and look at your house, probably.
No, I would have paid for nothing. I mean, that's the crazy thing of it is insurance is like a reverse lottery ticket. It just is. You pay for it. You hope you never actually have to use it.
Yeah, right.
But if you ever are in that situation, you're just doing the math on, okay, if I ever get injured, if I ever have an problem at my house or whatever, like, the amount you're going to actually end up paying for it is just gargantuan compared to what you might pay over the course of a year. And again, you kind of think of even over the lifetime of owning a house, that does add up, right? But one event probably covers the entire lifetime of you paying insurance.
Sure.
And so, and it's also sort of spread out over 30, 40, 50 years.
Yeah. I mean, you said that, and it's not important what the actual dollar value was, but you said it was over six figures that you were dealing with, I
think by the time it was all said and done, it was probably $120,000.
Okay. So saying that, you at $1,200 in Pennsylvania or $1,500 a year nationwide, you could be paying for homeowners insurance for the next, what are the 100 years? No, not 100. 50, 60 years, and still not come up to that amount of money.
Yeah, no, it was gargantuan. And again, I mean, there's some things that could have been done differently that maybe would have brought that number down. The kitchen by itself was obviously a big hit on it, but even so, even if they had done everything perfectly and done the minimum, it still would have been $60,000 all day long.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, yeah, I mean, having that insurance that we pay for, and again, for us, it was mandated, but even if it wasn't mandated, just looking back, especially with the experience I've been through, it would be madness to not have that at this point, just knowing that all it takes is one thing. And, I genuinely don't know what we would have done if we had to just pay all that out of pocket. I'd have had to get a loan. It would have been, and again, I'm blessed in that we maybe could have made it through that. There's a lot of people, and even my own life where I would say, I literally can't afford to continue to own this house.
Sure.
I'd have to sell it in some way or do something to get out from underneath this now wrecked house and hope that I can, get out with the minimum amount of personal liability and damage and everything else. So yeah, I would never own a house or whatever without having that. And I will say I was a person who didn't have renter's insurance. Knowing what I know now, if I would go back and kick my 20-year-old self and tell him, get renter's insurance.
Yeah, right.
It makes the difference when that comes down to it.
Yeah. I think that it's important, and I think this has been a fantastic conversation, and I think it's important to sort of see it from this perspective, because I think, Jeff, you would probably agree that we constantly preach at people about doing certain things like this, but it's easy for us to say it because it's people might say, oh well, you're in the business of selling this stuff. It's your job to sell, to do that. Right. But when you actually talk with people that have gone through something like this, and you realize what is involved in the process, it's that much more, I think, impactful to understand that it's not just me or Jeff or your bank, wherever you happen to bank, or whatever your insurance company is or whatever. They're not just pushing this on you because it makes them money. I mean, it does. I mean, we're all in business we're all in business. I mean, but it really is a service to you that if you ever have to use it, it's well worth it. I mean,
saving you from having headaches down the road.
And that's one of the big keys is I think about what I went through, how many phone calls I had to make. And there were a lot. It wasn't excessive. It was just a lot, because that's what it's a major thing to go through.
Yeah. It's not a simple process. Right. It was never meant to be.
But then if I think about man, if I had to not only deal with going back and forth with insurance, going back and forth with a contractor, if I had to also be going back and forth with how am I going to pay for this? How am I going to, and all the, again, like I said, I could say, hey, contractor, you work with the insurance company, here's the budget, and we'll work this out. And then I could step back a little bit and just go about my day. Mm-hmm. If it was everything out of pocket, And again, I'm a DIY kind of person, so I can just think about how much would I have been trying to take on? How much would I have been, just had to been in every moment of every day fighting for like, oh no, that's too expensive. You got to do this way. Are you making sure that that's done right? Or like, it would have been my every waking thought until it was done.
And it would probably be in your thoughts even now, because then you'd be thinking to yourself, was it done right?
Did I do it right? Yeah.
Is there something happening behind the walls that I didn't know about or I didn't see that, 5 years from now, 10 years from now is going to creep up on me and slap me across the head, and I'm going to realize that I did something wrong.
Which is shocking that your insurance company dropped you, because now they know that your house is like completely rehabbed.
Like, no one is going to have fewer incidents of this type of thing in the future than somebody who has been through this particular thing.
Right.
But it is what it is. At the end of the day, again, it's a business.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've thought about that many times. I've just thought about like if I didn't have this in my corner, and I had a good broker in my corner, I had a good contractor in my corner, and at the end of the day, I had a good insurance company in my corner. The fact that they took care of us at every step, and I don't want, like I said, I'm not trying to throw the mitigation team under the bus. They were good too. Everybody was good, and for as much as I had to be on the phone and stuff, to think of, would I have gotten that good of a contractor if I knew every dime was coming out of my pocket? Would I have gotten that good of anything? And I would have been doing those mental adjustments on every last little thing of like, I could get that for half the price. But then is it going to be half as good?
Sure, right.
Everything. So just being able to say, look, it was touch and go, like where I just was stressed, but at the end of the day, they paid everything. The contractor took care of everything. The mitigation was done well. And that peace of mind by itself was worth my premium for the year, even if it wasn't mandated by having a mortgage company.
And even if everything wasn't done to how you wanted it done, you still have that money now that you can go and make those changes down the road, because you didn't have to front everything.
And interestingly, because it had, oddly enough, because there were all the people with vested interests involved, like the insurance company made sure that stuff was done up to par. They were going to come in and make sure, is this actually correctly dried? Is this built correctly? Everything else, is this a reasonable kitchen for this house based on, there were, in a weird way, it's like you have people who have a vested interest in the success of this endeavor. They don't want to pay for it. They don't want to pay for it. No one wants to pay for it, but they have a vested interest in getting it done right because they are paying for it. And in a weird way, the fact that I had all that in my corner ended up being, a blessing in so many ways.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, we really can't thank you enough for coming down and talking to us about it. I mean, I think that it's hopefully people will listen to this and hopefully get them, think about their own situation. And if you are a homeowner and for whatever reason you think you're skating by without having insurance, you may want to think that over again. But it also gives people a strong sense of what is involved when you have to file a claim, because thankfully there are a lot of people out there that never have to do that. And if they had to do it, I don't know that a lot of people would even necessarily know what the first step would be to take. So I think this gives people a sense of, okay, well, I'm going to have to call my broker. I'm going to have to call my agent, and then they're going to put me in touch with somebody that's going to put me in touch with somebody. Like, they're going to guide you through it to a certain extent to get you in touch with certain people, but it's still up to you as the homeowner then to say, okay, well, now I got to find a reputable contractor, and now I got to find a reputable mitigation company, or I got to find, whatever it is. It's still on you to do that stuff. Like, it's not picking up the phone, making one phone call,
and everything's done for you. Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe with a bigger insurance company or whatever else. I mean, it's my experience is my experience. It might be different for folks, but just, again, if I can make a plug, having a good broker is a big deal for me. Having a good insurance company, having good all the way up the chain. And again, all of that, I didn't make any magic choice that I happen to have a particularly good broker. We just did, right? We got lucky. But the fact that we had a good broker, that was a starting point that they took care of us. They helped us. And in some cases, they even fought for us a little bit to try and help push, to try and help get us new insurance, to try and do whatever. So, definitely if you have homeowners who are on the fence about it or whatever else, like I said, it's a reverse lottery ticket. You just, you might save some money now, but if you ever have to deal with it, if you ever have to go through this, And again, I keep thinking like, man, what that would have been every waking moment of my life for more than 6 months. It took 6 months.
Right.
Years worth of thinking about that. I'd still be thinking about that. So yeah, absolutely. All the way up the chain, we just had good people in our corner and we had a good insurance, everything else. I'd 100% I'd do that over. I wouldn't do any of this over again, but I'd make those decisions on having a good broker, having a good insurance company, making that investment in what is otherwise my other most expensive investment is my house, having the insurance on that was so worth it.
Yeah.
Even if it wasn't required of me,
All right, Jeff, you got anything else?
I don't. That was great. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Yep.
This podcast focuses on having valuable conversations on various topics related to banking and financial health. The podcast is grounded in having open conversations with professionals and experts with the goal of helping to take some of the mystery out of financial and related topics, as learning about financial products and services can help you make more informed financial decisions. Please keep in mind that the information contained within this podcast and any resources available for download from our website or other resources relating to bank chats is not intended and should not be understood or interpreted to be financial advice. The hosts, guests, and production staff of Bank Chats expressly recommend that you seek advice from a trusted financial professional before making financial decisions. The hosts of Bank Chats are not attorneys, accountants, or financial advisors, and the program is simply intended as one source of information. The podcast is not a substitute for a financial professional who is aware of the facts and circumstances of your individual situation.
The story related today is just one example of a homeowner's need to quickly deal with an expensive and unexpected situation. When your ceiling is caving in and water is rushing everywhere, there's really no option but to deal with it, regardless of the cost involved. Having homeowners insurance is the only realistic way that many of us could possibly hope to pay for the repairs in a timely manner. Though many of us tend to think of insurance when we see homes that have been destroyed by fire, hurricane, tornado, or other natural disaster, your policy can certainly be engaged for other reasons. We hope that Matt's true story today helps to give you some sense of what a situation like this could look like. But of course, everyone's experience can be different depending upon the kind of damage, what your policy covers, and who holds it. So please, be sure to check your coverage carefully. AmeriServ Presents Bank Chats is produced and distributed by AmeriServ Financial Incorporated. Music by Schneckmind. Co-hosted and executive produced by Jeffrey McTavish. If you haven't yet subscribed, please consider doing so. But perhaps even more importantly, consider sharing our episodes with people you know who could benefit from the content. For now, I'm Drew Thomas. So long.